You opposed? Okay.
Brown.
Brown's the only no? All right, motion passes 8 to 1, or 9 to 1. Nick.
Page 14, Resolution 906. Resolution ratifying the actions of Knox County Internal Auditor in commencing a performance audit of the Knox County Schools Credit Card Program and in proceeding with the audit, and the extent and scope shall be developed by the internal auditor, and authorizing the internal auditor to conduct an audit of the Knox County Schools Purchasing Program and its travel expenditures should she deem it necessary, with the extent and scope of such audit to be developed by the internal auditor. Resolution 906.
Is there a motion?
Second. Move.
I didn't hear you. Was there a motion?
Move.
Approval. Is there a second? You have a motion and a second. Commissioner Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In line with some discussion that we've been receiving via email and phone call and whatever, there is one, and I have in front of me the resolution. The second, whereas during the course of a duly noticed meeting of the audit committee, it was recommended that full commission consider an internal audit of the Knox County Schools credit card program. And I believe we sort of tapered off into, well, we don't know where we went. And we ended up with we here have before us, we've ended up with our sentence being proceed with an audit, the extent and scope shall be determined by the internal auditor. Now, some people have interpreted that apparently to mean that we're going to do a shallow audit. That the recommendation of the audit committee was to have an audit. The action of the full commission is now what I'm calling into discussion. So I believe we need, I'm going to stop with my discussion right there and let other people chime in with what they think that particular paragraph means to the specificity and depth of an audit that would be conducted internally, and then open the door to whether or not people think that internal audit then is going to be sufficient.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I'm going to take just a few minutes and kind of talk to you guys about the process that we followed with Andrea and I and the law director. And some of the discussion that, I think I even spoke with Chairman McMillan and Ms. Roundtree after their action last month at their school board meeting. And so we were kind of making sure we were all on the same page and letting everybody be aware of where we're at with the audit. A lot of folks are concerned about an internal audit versus an external audit, and we were in contact with the external auditor and Mr. McLemore, and we discussed, or it has been discussed, I wasn't part of that discussion, but they feel that it would be best done internally. They're going to keep an eye on the bottom line, how it affects the budget, how it affects the financial statements of the county and the school system. And also the question of the forensic. When we talk about a forensic audit, I think people think that the forensic audit is not being done. The forensic audit is being done by the State Comptroller's Office. And so if the external or internal auditor had gone in and found criminal matter, they would stop their audit and turn it over to an investigatory jurisdiction. And so that was actually started before the internal or audit was even done. And so the controls audit that internal audit is currently proceeding with is something that looks to prevent, looks at the measures that are in place and looks to prevent these measures from happening again. If there is a criminal side or the criminal investigation side, catch me if I'm out of line, is done by somebody outside of an internal or external auditor. Those things are being done. There's 3 eyes on this discussion, and I think that we're going to make sure that we do exactly what we need to do to make sure that hopefully those are being, if there is any wrongdoing, those that are held accountable and to prevent it from happening again. So I'll go ahead and make that as to kind of where we came up to where we're at, and we'll start with Commissioner Bustler.
If I remember correctly, and I was looking at the request we got from the school board, and the school board requested by, I guess, Mr. McMillan was an external audit, and we kind of changed it here on our board of what he was requesting from us. And I was just wondering, I'm new at this is my 3rd meeting, but if somebody requests something specifically from us, are we not obligated to look at that external audit, or do we change it to what we feel is right? I mean, if another body comes to us and said, we feel we need this, and that was not discussed off of that letter that was sent to us because they were requesting an external audit out beyond the boundaries of Knox County here. So I'm just asking, should we not have discussed that a little bit more before we passed what we did pass?
Well, I think the external auditor was already aware, and what Andrea had done and has, once the Yellow Book standard requires her, once she sees smoke, that she's to react to it. And that's exactly what she did. It came to the law director, myself, and the external auditor and started having those discussions. And so, again, they asked for an external forensic audit. A forensic audit is looking for criminal matters. Those things are already being looked at by the state comptroller's office. At the time, they weren't aware that the comptroller's office was there. They were there before we were aware that they were there, which is fine. And so all of the steps that were taken for this audit were vetted out through 3 or 4 people. And I spoke with, after I got the letter from Mr. Commissioner or Board Member McMillan, he and I spoke about it, and we just wanted to, he and I both agreed that, and Amber and I agree, all the steps need to be taken to make sure to hold those accountable for actions and to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's the concern. I think that's how we approached the process. But the internal audit standards or auditing standards, governmental auditing standards require when there's smoke, they need to react, and she did that. So that's kind of how that process started.
Okay.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Commissioner Wright mentioned earlier, there is some misconception with the public about what was actually voted in last week. They asked for a 5-year outside. What we did, after a much long discussion, was authorize, and as I said last week and the week before that, a month before that, the buck stops here as far as making the final decision. We authorized a 2-year with the authority to go as deep as she needed to go. We also added in the credit cards and the travel in as far as she needs to go. So she has to move, as Commissioner Anders just pointed out, very gingerly in this, because you have some criminal investigation going on, and you can't, our auditor can't, or the outside auditor can't interfere with that or do anything that would negate any possible culpability for recovery. So we have to tread lightly, and I don't want the public to think that we're pussyfooting around this thing, and that seems to be the concession. She has the authority, and if you want to get in on this conversation, be at the audit committee meeting next week on 25th, because this is going to be discussed again, and we will firm up this policy of who's on first, who's on second, so that, as Mr. Elmore from our outside auditor pointed out, you know, you don't wait for 2 months until after something happens to go start looking and see what happened. That's a long time to cover up a lot of stuff. If we found out about it today, she needs to be in there tomorrow. And whether it's the commission chairman or the audit committee chairman or them both or either, that gives her the authority to go ahead, then that's what's going to have to be done. And that's what we're going to be discussing next week at the audit committee meeting. Now, it is kind of a sticky wicket, but Rome wasn't built in a day. If you go off half-cocked on something, you only get half the answers. So I think we're on the right trail right now, and I think the plans are in place to do what we need to do, and it's not going to be a fluff audit. There's talk about the PPU one. Well, we've not really had an open discussion on that. There are figures available, and those are going to be discussed next week at the audit committee meeting. So if you're interested in that PPU audit and want to know what was in it, come to the meeting.
Commissioner Brantley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. First of all, I believe that we should have addressed at the beginning the request for an outside auditor, and that was met by the outside auditor, who told members of this commission and our audit committee that they didn't think it was necessary, or that's what I understand. And I don't think a lot of people have heard that or know that, because they think there's some shenanigans going on. However, I do think we should do one thing. I believe that this commission should specify exactly what the auditor should be doing and no more. And I think this paragraph gives the auditor too much leeway in what they can do. That gives an auditor an opportunity to do things that an audit is not supposed to do, which could be going in areas they don't need to be going in for other reasons than what we want them to. And I think the auditor should only do exactly what we ask them to do and no more, and look at one thing at a time and take care of that issue. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Ormby.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree. I was at both the audit committee meeting and the regular commission last week, and what we got from my interpretation from the outside auditor was, we're already doing this. We're already on top of this. Comptroller's already doing their criminal investigation. Pew and Company is doing theirs. Andrea was just doing basically a third set of eyes to nail down the processes and everything like that. I think that we've given her the leeway to go 5 years. I mean, if we need to make it concrete that it's 5 years, we need you to go. But Pew and Company said that would take her a long time. There's a lot of transactions in 5 years, because you're not talking about the 6 credit cards here. You're talking about the 27 Sam's credit cards, the 232 fuel cards that they have, not to mention the travel cards and any other credit cards they may have that has to be looked into. Any PayPal accounts that are out there, we don't know what they have. So until she gets in there, I think 2 years is good, with her option to go 3 more until she uncovers this. But the lawyer for the sheriff's office even said, you don't want her digging too much, because they're doing an investigation, and there's, you don't want people stepping on their toes what they need to do. And I know this is probably not the time, but I'd like to discuss basically the setup of these 2 audits, how they came about, because we still, according to TCA 49-2-301, the superintendent still has not notified this body of these 2 misappropriation of funds. Still to this day, we have not got formal transmission from him. And we need to know. We need to know on the nutrition audit how far that went back. And notifying the News Sentinel or the media or stuff is not the same. Code says that it has to notify us and the Commissioner of Education. And those still have not been notified. And we're talking the nutrition audit starting September 11th, and it wasn't, we didn't get a letter from them until after we done called for the special audit of the nutrition. And then we got a letter saying they wanted us to audit it. And then now we got the credit card, which is only the 6 credit cards. Has the rest of these fuel cards, Sam's cards, have they been transferred over to the county's program? I mean, those are still out there. The fuel cards, that's really troubling to me. 232 of them that are not monitored right now. I mean, are they filling up their personal cars with these credit cards? You know, that's a lot of credit cards, gas cards for somebody to be using. And are they buying snacks and everything else through Pilot with those cards? I mean, those are questions. If nobody's looked at them, that's the whole point of Andrea looking at all these credit cards to find out where we're at, where we need to go, and what processes we need to put in place. If she finds any criminal activity, then that's stuff that needs to be turned over. And she said that by law, she has to turn that over to the sheriff's office and the comptroller because they're investigating it. So I think some of these questions still need to be answered, and what we're doing or how this came about. You know, when did the superintendent know, and what does he know, and when did he know it? So thank you.
Commissioner McKenzie.
Oh, wow. Okay, so, you know, I guess the last comment kind of makes my points. And I do agree with Commissioner Ormby, Commissioner Brantley. I just, in that the scope is my issue. The scope is my only issue. And it's for reasons as you know, I would say is the theme behind statements like the one was just made, and first dealt with it, you know, during a history lesson with Beck. The court of public opinion started in, they're stealing the money, they're stealing the money. And then we got to have an audit. No, we don't want an internal audit, we want an external audit. No, we didn't want an external audit because it's going to cost money, let's do an internal audit. Then that one comes back clean and nothing's done. You know, people planted seeds around, and folks know, you know, the seed planters know, you know, and you just watch the crap grow up out of it. There's some issues. Let's stick to the issues and not let, again, the court of an email here or there or a planted, you know, seed here or there drive us. We're the legislative body. This is set up for us to start for a reason. You know, the whole PPU thing, it didn't start out, okay, there were some issues, but initially there was this big slush fund that people were just using to do this and that and, you know, willy-nilly. That wasn't right. That wasn't based in fact. Although some issues associated with the audit, there were no material findings of, you know, theft and thievery and political gain and all this other stuff. That was this big innuendo. So again, my whole point on this one, these things are going to get a look, and I want them to get a good look, but we've got to define the scope of this thing. We have to. We can't let an email drive. Well, we got an email saying that it's this way. We got to throw out the internal auditor. We hired a pretty, what I've seen to be, to this point, pretty darn good auditor in terms of her being strategic in nature, understanding what her department is, what her scope is, and what her scope isn't. I think we've done a good job. And we need to give her a scope and tell her to go ahead. This, and I was sitting here trying to wordsmith it, this is not a scope. This is open up all your drawers and have the 3 or 4 of us just start looking in it. That's what we're telling her. That's no kind of guidance. She can't do that in any kind of reasonable time fashion as written. So again, I don't know how to start getting this into something, but I guess my question to Commissioner Wright, because I think he was starting down that road initially, are these the words and all the other words that support this that came out of the audit committee? And if so, what do you think the end result was?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you.
the audit committee met for a short period of time to make a look at some of the facts that were before us and to guess that there were facts out there that we did not have knowledge of, and that some way a report must have been made to some point of authority, which at some point in time results in what we read in the newspaper. And as I was saying when I first made my comment about the audit committee, the thing that we want to avoid is having the auditor come back saying, well, I ran into this, but it's not in the scope of what I was directed to do. I believe the audit committee's recommendation to the full commission was that the internal auditor follow all leads as related to credit instruments used by the Board of Education.
Okay, so and we're starting with those 6, and then
I believe that we've already had that discussion just a moment ago. It's all credit devices, vehicles, instruments.
Travel.
Well, no, just it doesn't matter whether it was travel or pencils or fuel. If it's done by a credit instrument, then it's fair to be looked at under what the audit committee recommended to full commission. Now, whenever you read the whereas, it says to be the extent and scope shall be developed by the internal auditor. I want people to understand it's the largest scope. It's the most items to look at, not a few items. It's all the items. That's where we started when we were talking about this, when I was trying to talk about it earlier.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, everything that's transpired in the past few months really, to me, says there needs to be transparency in the school system. I mean, it's just amazing that everything's supposedly fine, and then something else pops up, and then something else, and it just amazes me that somehow we can't. I realize the state of Tennessee controls basically the schools, but we provide the guidance and so forth. But this is another red flag that we need more transparency there. Second of all, there is a misconception, as the emails everybody's referred to, that somehow this auditor, our internal auditor, works for the school board. I've had emails that say that, and it needs to be clear. The auditor, the internal auditor, works for this body. That's right. And this body only. And I'm very confident that they're very competent and they're going to do an excellent job. I do trust that they're going to do a great job, and they're not going to be influenced by anybody. Now, that being said, still let the people have their will. I mean, I can go either way on it. I am concerned, though, are we putting so much work on our internal auditor that then when it's not done in a brief amount of time, then everybody's going to be mad and assume there's shenanigans going on. And third of all is the cost that it's still, we just throw around external audits, and somebody has to pay for that. Now, I understand our external auditor is going to be paid on an hourly basis. And this, the control of the state audit, we're going to pay for that. State's not going to pay for that. We're going to pay for that. So we're already paying to have an internal auditor. I really think we ought to let them do their job. If we don't like what we see, then we'll take the next step. But I kind of feel like we have to do their job, but if the citizens of Knox County don't trust our internal auditor, or, well, sometimes I don't think they trust anybody, we've got to make sure that they do. Okay. Thank
Chris, do you have something? Are you done, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, thank you.
Chris, did you need something, Chris?
I want to clarify a few things. During the last few weeks, I've worked really closely with Andrea and our external auditors, Larry Elmore, and with Bob Thomas and Ron McPherson at schools. And so I'm going to give you all some information that I don't know if you all know, and just clarify a few things. The pilot cards that are at schools, the 223 or 232, whatever that number is, that program was issued through our purchasing department. And so that is a vetted process. It's similar to the one that is at our sheriff's department. We're going to work closely with schools from an internal control process to see how that is being handled. But from the card standpoint itself, it was done appropriately. Since everything has taken place, I can tell you that the SAMS cards have been canceled. The 6 SunTrust credit cards have been canceled. We're in the process of adopting, the schools are going to adopt the county's travel policy. In doing this, they will be allowed to get travel cards. We're also going to issue them some e-cards in place of these credit cards. They already have some e-cards that they use. And what we're going to do during this process is do a lot of training, from e-card training with Janice Orr to contract and procurement training with Hugh Holt, and also some AP training through our office and Jeff Clark. I know Bob is probably tired of looking at me because he saw me enough. And so we got some things in place that we're working on. So I know that sometimes that doesn't get out, and so I want to make that clear. And we're continuing to work on some things, and I'm sure you'll hear about them soon. And I think we can get through this process, and we'll be better for it. It'll be more transparent, and it'll be more efficient and effective. And I would like to speak on Andrea for a second. I've worked really close with Andrea since she's been here. I know that we've talked about a little bit about the timing of the PPU audit. I don't think some of the new commissioners are aware. When Andrea walked into her situation, she had nothing that she could use. I mean, she started ground zero. And so she had to use a lot of time just to get policies and procedures in place and get things where they need to be. Then she had some staffing issues that we're in the process of addressing. And so I think a lot of the things was out of her control. I'd also wanted to talk about what Dave talked about a little bit too, Commissioner Wright, in the sense that she does have a work plan, a generalized work plan that the audit committee does approve. What you will hear if you come to the audit committee next week, I believe it is, from our external auditor, Larry Elmore, he'll say, when you take the element of surprise away from internal audit, you have killed that role and that function. He said in a meeting with me and Law Director Armstrong, and he said you cannot limit what your internal auditor is doing, because when you limit the element of surprise, then that function is gone. And so if she has to get everything approved to say, oh, by the way, Chris, I'm coming to finance to look at petty cash in 3 weeks, then that gives me time to clean up things that may not have been cleaned up. We don't have petty cash in finance, just so you know. That's why I use that analogy.
There's another audit.
Exactly. And so just keep that in mind as you go through this. I wanted to clarify the school situation, because we've been in very close contact and working through some things, and a lot of that doesn't get out. There was a press release on the travel policy and those cards, but other than that, if you have anything for me, just feel free to call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Caldwell, so you have given us significant pieces of information that we did not have, and I understand it takes time sometimes to get the word around of what's going on. But let me ask you this question. If in you're working with something, and you find something, are you bound by, we're talking yellow book stuff now, right? If you come into something that you perceive personally and professionally, you find questions about its appropriateness or its legalities, you go to law enforcement, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And then your lips are sealed from us?
That's
Okay.
That's a fair statement.
I wanted to start there because I think with the facts as we read them or hear it in the local media, there are people off the payroll permanently, and there are also people off the payroll pending. Now I'm going to speak to Commission for just a second. In the many months, because I've not been here all that many years, we've had phantom employees, we've had inappropriate payment of monies, and those things have laid with us for years until there be resolution, and some of them are still laying with us unresolved. So I think the thing that we sitting commissioners have to realize is that we may not be able to know the resolution of some of these things till way after our terms have ended on these things that are just now coming up, because the things I mentioned a moment ago, one was a couple, 3 years ago, one was occurring long before any of us became interested in being on this political body. So there are things that we will not know because of law enforcement, and there are things that will take an extreme length of time to wind their way through the courts. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Bustler.
Like I say, I'm new at this, but it seems that we're charged with, as it says in the code annotated 489-2-101, section 3, that if we feel or see that it appears that money is being misused, then we've got to act on it, which we did. But there's one thing that we haven't had, and that's information. And under the county code that Chairman Ormby said, 49-2-301, there's statutory responsibilities that the superintendent or the director of schools, how it's printed in here, owes us, and he hadn't been here to give us that information. That's his statutory responsibility, and I'll read it right here. Report to the local legislative body, that's us, and it says, and to the commissioner, which is, I guess, the state commissioner, whenever it appears to the director that any portion of the school's fund has been or in danger of being misappropriated or in any way illegally disposed of or not collected. Now, I've been here 3 meetings. We've had instances occur, and I have yet to have the superintendent of schools give us a report. And I hope this commission will demand that statutory responsibility from the superintendent of schools. And that's all I got to say about that. We need that report. We're working on information that should have been reported to us months ago. So I think we need to demand that. We need to expect it and have that report from our superintendent or director of schools.
I'll get with the law department and craft a letter or an email to him and ask him for it. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Each of you all ask yourself this question. I'm laying on a hospital operating table getting a heart transplant, and while he's got me all cut open, he finds out my gallbladder is bad. Do you want him to go ahead and sew you up and let somebody else worry about the gallbladder? Or you want to eat your gallbladder while you're in there? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. If she finds something that she feels is wrong with her expert opinion, then she has and should have the authority to go ahead and do it. since these credit cards have been canceled, she doesn't have to worry about process as much anymore, maybe as she would normally. She can go straight to the heart of the matter and look at the individual items. And this is what has to be done and needs to be done yesterday. Now, we fiddled around here for an hour and a half and decided, haven't yet voted that this should be going ahead and getting done. So I call for the question.
I got, real quick, I got two more people, but I also searched my email because I had thought I'd saw an email from Dr. McIntyre, and I do have an email that I failed to forward to you guys dated October the 30th that I'm doing it right now in regards to his statutory requirement. He met that requirement. I just didn't feel, I thought it went to the whole commission, and it didn't. So I'll take care of that right now. Commissioner Brantley.
Thank you very much. Just very briefly, I'd like to make a substitute motion that we have our internal auditor investigate the 6 credit cards for the 5 years and all other credit cards in Knox County schools for 2 years, and report back to Knox County Commission, and depending upon the results, we can go further from there.
Second.
How about a friendly amendment to that, credit devices? That
Why
way
do you
it
want to tie her hands?
Well, here's my thing. She's going to find there's already the investigative part of what we're desiring to find is already being done by the comptroller. She's going to go back and study systems, not numbers, because once she finds something criminal, she has to turn it over to the comptroller's office. It's already been done. I just want to make sure that y'all are aware that if she finds something criminal, she stops and starts her audit, or reports it. It's already been reported, so I don't know. I wish she were here today, but she's not. Do you have anything else? Do you have the substitute motion?
Well, the point is that we've been requested by the school board to do this audit. I'm just saying that we go ahead with this. If she has to stop, she has to stop. But we should proceed with everything that we have in our power to make sure that happens. I'm not comfortable with giving her carte blanche.
Okay. Commissioner Owenby.
I see Chris left. I really wanted to, oh, there you are. Sorry, Chris. Thought you walked out the door. I don't know if you can answer. I know the purchasing department issued the pilot gas cards and all that. I'm not disputing that they weren't done properly. My question is who's monitoring those? Are we balancing fuel that's entered, the mileage that's entered? Are we making sure that somebody's not, not saying that anybody is, but are we making sure that there's a pin attached to these, that it ties to that person that used that card, and that they're not using it every single day, unless they're driving 400 and something miles a day. That's my question. I mean, in the private sector, that's what they do with their gas cards. You enter the mileage, you enter your PIN number, and it's linked to you, and they balance it every day. So I didn't know is that happening? I've been told that it's not, and that's the reason I'm asking. So,
to be quite honest, I can't answer that question. We've not got into the internal control process.
Chris, I thought she wanted to answer part of the question. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We've not got into the internal control process of those pilot cards yet. I do know that Roger was overseeing those cards, I do believe. Bob would know more than I. And how that process was working from a standpoint of internal controls and reconciliation, I'm not for sure.
I know in the sheriff's office we do monitor those. We do the mileage and everything, from my understanding.
I can tell you that I have seen something had came up about pilot travel cards in the past, and I actually sat down with the sheriff's department, and they went through their process with me at that time, and so I know how that process works, and there's duplication of checks here and there and checks and balances, and so I know how those work. I told Bob Thomas at schools that as we look through those internal control processes, we can get them with the sheriff's department, and we can develop a plan. If that's not what they're doing, but I can't say that's not what they're doing. I'm not for sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, what we have before us right now is a substitute motion.
Mr. Chairman.
I think Sam seconded it.
I did.
It is Commissioner Hornby said something following that about, is it just 6 credit cards or is it credit instruments?
Devices.
Credit instruments, devices.
Again, I ask, why do you want to tie her hands?
Well, that's,
Devices opens it up to anything.
yeah.
It's
That
not.
opens-
I don't know if that friendly amendment was accepted. I know it's a second.
that's my
I don't-
point of
Yeah, that's why you're
order.
bringing this up. Because I guess I don't understand the word devices. We're just introducing terms left and right here, and I don't know if anybody knows the definition of them. So that, I'm struggling with the word device.
So then, I'm asking the question, as we get ready to vote on this, are you limiting this to the 6 credit cards?
I'm limiting it to what the school board asks us to do,
And that is,
is the 6 credit cards and all other credit cards, the 6 credit cards for 5 years and all other credit cards for 2 years. That's what it is. So that would be any type of credit thing, I guess. It has to be on a credit card or some type of credit thing.
that's good terminology, credit thing.
A credit thing, I like that. Or, yeah,
Credit instrument.
yeah, credit instrument or
They did
there you
it,
go.
that's not what they asked for.
All right, we have a substitute motion on the floor to go to the 6 credit cards for 5 years, all other credit cards for 2 years. Any more discussion on that item? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do a roll call vote. Starting in the first.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Aye.
Commissioner McKenzie votes aye. Commissioner Broyles is aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith votes aye. Commissioner Ormby?
Aye.
Commissioner Ormby votes aye. Commissioner Anders?
Pass.
Commissioner Anders passes. Commissioner Bessler?
Aye.
Commissioner Bessler votes aye. Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
Commissioner Wright votes aye. Commissioner Brown?
No,
Commissioner Brown votes no. Commissioner Thomas?
Aye.
Commissioner Thomas votes aye. Commissioner Brantley?
Aye.
Commissioner Brantley votes aye. Does the pass wish to vote?
I do, and the vote is no. I think it limits her capability.
Commissioner Anders votes no. 7-2.
All right, substitute motion passes, and we'll move forward.
Okay, now we're going to go to resolution 802 that was added.
we're supposed to be looking out for that.
This item was added to
For
the
Knox County
agenda.
taxpayers.
A resolution of